We're all here because we love Callala and we want it to have an abundant and beautiful future. We're here because stripping Callala's natural assets to cram in a kind of a Lego land housing will define it as another sprawling car-dependent suburb forever. No turning back. But mainly we are here because we have all been shut out of the decision-making about our town. So let's confront the elephant in the room. Is this meeting about the environment? Yes. Is this meeting about politics? No. The laws of nature are not affected by our vote. Science, climate, and environmental realities should underwrite planning decisions, regardless of who's in charge. Did you know that property developers don't need to engage with community until after their developments are approved? And they don't need agreement, they just need to tick off consultation. Developers have constant access to politicians and planners. They sit together on industry boards and advisory panels. They donate to and campaign for parties that support their cause and their goals, Volunteer community representatives don't sit on these development committees, business chambers, or tourism task forces, and yet we are directly impacted by their decisions. As the state government did over the rezoning of our glider forest, we were ignored, despite the fact that 97.4% of us in more than 1,000 submissions opposed the rezoning and asked for nature conservation values to be upheld. As we revealed in documents obtained under the Freedom of Information, even government scientists who rejected the developer's biodiversity report were sidelined. There are 3 ways that you can get involved and have real impact. First, challenging the government push to rezone and clear important habitats is crucial. The glider forest rezoning without biodiversity certification was, according to the current New South Wales Minister for Planning, a mistake. Second, we can demand that developers collaborate with community first. This benefits both parties. Citizen science data and local infrastructure knowledge should inform town planning, not just be used by us to fight their exploitation. Developers have no incentive to seek us out, so we need to be proactive. Finally, we can unite and strengthen our community with social events, recreational activities, and buy local campaigns that bring us together to support small business, services, and the tourism, which is an inevitable part of Callala Bay. Now, Callala Matters has sought direct communication with CLARC and the Halloran Trust about incorporating our community's vision and endangered species habitat into their subdivision. How did they respond? Well, first, they said, and I quote, "CLARC intends to proceed with the development. It is not clear to us what contribution could be made at any meeting by a scientist." I can't imagine a developer better positioned to achieve their stated nature-positive legacy. And with smart, climate-resilient planning, we can rescue threatened species, create sanctuaries, while building homes and welcoming tourists. But only by doing all of those things will this community really thrive. Without courage and commitment, Callala may well become another bland, crowded, concrete playground where property investors dance on the graves of extinct Australian heritage. What a tragic waste that would be. Thank you.
I'm going to take you back 100 years, more than 100 years, when Henry Halloran bought up vast tracts of land across the Shoalhaven, hoping to build a grand new city at Jervis Bay. It was a vision that never materialized. Over time, even the Shoalhaven Shire recognized that this land was best left untouched. In 1964, the Shire began quietly acquiring lots through rates arrears, advising landowners that, quote, keeping the bush intact was in the best interests of the area. That was 1964. In 1975, the Commonwealth government agreed. It did a report, Development Pressures on Jervis Bay, that concluded that the land should stay in or be returned to its natural state. But here we are in 2025, and somehow the old pipe dream has come back to life, this time in the form of a sprawling 40-hectare subdivision for 380 cookie-cutter houses made possible when the state agreed to rezone the property 3 years ago. Halloran and Sealark point to the 2003 Jervis Bay settlement strategy as justification for this plan. But that document listed clear conditions for any future development, and all but one of them has been ignored. Let's go down the list. Threatened species? Back then, it was only the yellow-bellied glider. Today, we also have greater gliders, gang cockatoos, and Bowers midge orchid, all listed as endangered. That was a fail. Habitat corridors. There aren't any. Vegetation significance. The plan involves clear felling old-growth forest with important hollow-bearing trees. The biodiversity assessment calls this, quote, a complete loss of all biodiversity values. Well, that's a clear fail. Wetland buffers, stormwater will flow straight into Callala Creek. That's a fail. Flood and stormwater management. Well, properties on the eastern boundary already flood. This will make it even worse. Yet another fail. The ghosts are watching. Bushfire protection. The local RFS chief says that this land cannot be defended with current resources. Another fail. Setback from the road. Oh, they got that one right. Rezoning of this land was supposed to follow biodiversity certification. That's the rules. But the assessment report for the biocertification, prepared by the developer's own consultant, was outdated, incomplete, and ignored key changes following the 2019-2020 bushfires. Shoalhaven Council has some really talented ecologists who went on the property at the request of the planning department, reviewed the biocert application, and found major flaws. There was no plot data collected in the old growth forest. They looked for gliders, but carefully not where the gliders actually are, so they didn't find any. What do you know? The surveys were older than 5 years, and they used outdated methodology. They were allowed to use the methodology from 2 programs before. They were grandfathered in. So, council's own ecologists concluded that the subdivision should not be supported in its current form. That damning report was buried by council planners, was never passed on, and it was only revealed when we did a Freedom of Information request. In response, and because of strong community opposition, the previous council withdrew its support for the proposal. That set the developer back a couple of years. Okay, we proved that Halloran's biodiversity report was flawed, but what about all the other reports they did to support their rezoning? Here's the traffic report. It conveniently concludes, I don't know if you can read that, but it conveniently concludes that even in 10 years' time, and at the 100th highest hour, there will be no adverse traffic impacts. Right, 380 additional homes, holiday weekend, and no adverse traffic impacts? Well, that's what it says, and that's what the state apparently accepted. During the consultation window for the rezoning, 1,029 people made submissions. That's pretty good for a small town. Of that 1,029, 1,002 opposed the subdivision. But the state, keen to show, at least on paper, how serious they are about building new houses, approved the rezoning anyway, even without biodiversity certification. But what about the Shoalhaven's own strategic planning? The Shoalhaven 2040 strategic statement says, and I'm quoting, "Greenfield development should focus on the Narrabamideri area on cleared, unvegetated land, strategically located to make efficient and cost-effective use of existing and planned infrastructure. Development should conserve and protect significant habitats and areas of high biodiversity value. It should be located away from high conservation value land and areas of known environmental risks." Totally makes sense. That's the law. being completely ignored. None of those things are true in this case. So Halloran jumped on this housing crisis bandwagon to sell their subdivision plan. But they aren't developing homes for people. They're bulldozing old-growth forest to sell small, expensive, empty lots, only about 30 a year to maximize their profit. And with more than half of the houses in the Bay and Beach already empty at the last census, we clearly don't need more houses in Callala. This is a bad plan. It was a bad plan 50 years ago, and it's an even worse plan now. It represents the worst of planning gone wrong, ignoring community voices, bypassing expert advice, and greenlighting destruction under the guise of progress. This old-fashioned suburban sprawl is good for one thing only, maximizing profit for the landowner. All right, Halloran has this biobanking land, and the deal is, according to the rules, they're allowed to clear fell 40 hectares here, but that's okay because they have all this other biobank land that will serve as a home for all the gliders that don't actually die when their tree is cut down, but otherwise don't have any place to live or any food to eat. That's the idea. But this map, if you look at the orange dots, this comes from the Atlas of Living Australia. And you'll note that on the Halloran property, the blue property down the bottom, there's this whole concentration of greater gliders. But how many greater gliders are there elsewhere? Charitably, you could say there's 3, maybe 4. And it's what I referred to before. It's completely different land. As soon as you go over the ridge from the Halloran property into the first of their biobanks down in the south there, the land completely changes and becomes marshy and swampy as it drains into Welly Creek. There are no more of the big black butts that the gliders require. But never mind, they've got a total of 1,200 hectares of biobank land. Maybe the others are good. Well, anybody who's been out to Kinghorn knows that that whole place got bulldozed and grazed for many, many years. So there's nary a big tree left out there. And the northern section doesn't have very many either. So it's really garbage that they're allowed to knock this down and feel like they're doing the right thing because they've got this biobanking land.
So basically, I work in real estate, and based on first-hand experience, I can say that Callala is not at a point where rapid expansion is necessary or sustainable. At present, there's approximately 30 homes for sale in Callala Bay and about 15 in Callala Beach. This indicates there's no shortage of housing stock. Clear felling land at a rate of 40 blocks per year will not improve affordability or attract permanent residents. It will only continue to feed the growing demand from holiday investors. Between 2018 and 24, the number of registered holiday accommodation properties in the Shoalhaven grew from 2,500 to over 5,200. That's 2,700 homes lost to permanent rentals or owner occupation. And this figure doesn't even account for second homes that are just exclusively used for personal holiday houses that aren't registered as Airbnbs. The housing crisis in the Shoalhaven is not due to a shortage of homes, it's due to the overwhelming number of properties being converted to holiday rentals. There's already multiple subdivisions underway in the Nowra area, including in Camberwarra, South Nowra. These new estates are located near jobs and public transport, making them far more practical for permanent residents. If land was truly in short supply, these lots would already be sold out. So we need to ask ourselves, how do we sustainably grow a coastal town that mainly attracts tourists? How do we make housing more affordable for those who actually live and work here? A lot of people come into the real estate looking for something cheap, something small. One solution, I guess, just as someone with no real experience, would be encouraging development of second dwellings like granny flats or tiny homes on existing properties. That would definitely help low-income earners. And then there's also the infrastructure concerns, At the last council meeting, there were discussions about Culburra's open drains and ditches and ongoing flooding issues. If the new development proceeds, the responsibility for maintaining additional roads and stormwater will fall on council, an area where they're already underperforming, and can council afford to maintain yet another development? I guess what we should be asking CLARC is, where will their stormwater be directed? How will they manage the flood risks on roads like Callala Beach Road, Stock Crescent, Emmett Street? And will their runoff worsen existing flood issues? CLARC's promotional material highlights sustainable and environmentally friendly building practices. But they're not builders, they're clearing land. Most new builds are speculative homes, and the companies typically bring in workers from outside the area. These workers will maybe rent locally if there's anything to rent, and return home on weekends, contributing little to our local economy. Even large projects like the hospital are relying on out-of-town contractors, so there's no jobs for locals. And as a real estate agent who lives and works in this community, I cannot support short-term financial gain at the cost of long-term harm to our environment and our way of life. We're not NIMBYs, which means not in my backyard. We're not opposed to growth, nor do we resent others wanting to enjoy what we have here. But any development must be carried out with genuine care for the community and the environment. So we all ask ourselves how we can do this. I guess we continue campaigning, recruiting supporters, bombard all levels of government, continue with petitions and letters, more news coverage, utilise influencers, upload videos, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, share all the articles. Everyone invites all their friends list on Facebook to follow Callala Matters. Things grow. I don't know how to make things viral. I think young people know how to do that. But that's what we can do to help, I guess.
Don't be taken in by the CLARC spin, is the theme. The CLARC Callala website presents selective versions of facts. It contains errors of statement and omission, plus a sprinkling of green dust. Key claims include these. Open process and communication. That was actually a local community effort that was commissioned, that we started, which CLARC terminated rather suddenly with illegal letters. Callala Mayola people first approached CLARC consultants to establish the Halloran Liaison Group. Recent attempts by Callala Matters to continue consultation and exchanges of factual information have been refused by CLARC. CLARC's first proposal failed because of grossly flawed ecological studies, including, for example, looking for nocturnal species concentrated on the top of the hill by taking a wander in the middle of the day at the bottom of the hill. The withholding of Council's truly independent study and the state coalition approval, as Rob has mentioned, before required studies and assessment were received. The current Labour Minister has admitted procedural mistake but chose not to correct the error. Well, not yet. He may have to think again. Promises. Wetlands promised. Well, what you're likely to get is fast and massive stormwater runoff from about 2/3 of the hillside surface being sealed, no longer absorbing moisture. Roads, driveways and roofs would create hugely increased flooding downslope. The proposed retention and release ponds at the bottom of the slope are nowhere near adequate to the task. And past Halloran CLARC performance warns us loud and clear that they put in totally inadequate drainage, or none. Parks and reserves promised. The 5-hectare bushland reserve which they cite is an ecological no-go area for endangered orchids. It would have to be highly fenced to exclude people who might otherwise be wanting to souvenir the orchids. It's not a public space. The 2.2 kilometre long park from Callala Beach Road to Sealark Road is already required as bushfire asset protection zone. And APZ, mostly already dedicated to the existing settlement, an available right-of-way, but recently locked off by Sealark. Parklands and pathways are important, there's no question of that, but destroying 40 hectares of mature forest is not balanced by a few denuded firebreak parks. Affordable housing is promised. A minimum of 10% of the residences in the Callala Bay development will be affordable. Halloran Trust and Sealark have a stated objective to maximise the amounts available to the trustee. That's a quotation. That is in the trust deed. To maximise the amounts available to the trustee. Selling sites into the highest priced land market will not best advance full-time housing or any affordable housing. Even if they give an empty site to a community housing provider, they're not giving the house, just the site. A scattered site which the community housing providers don't want. They want a concentration of sites near jobs and services, not scattered in distant villages without public transport adequate to the needs of the people. Sealark is delivering a choice of new homes, they say, and the site will comprise approximately 380 new homes. Again, they quote, sales of vacant land will take approximately 10 years to complete. The truth? Sealark has not yet undertaken building homes, period. How many empty sites will be left land banked? How many will become holiday homes? How many short-term rentals? Sealark's strategy actually delays delivery of housing because it diverts resources towards holiday houses and short-term stays for the wealthy. Sealark maximises land profits, then leaves the problem. Affordable housing is not delivered or assured. We've still got vacant blocks in the original Halloran release of land that haven't been built. A nature-positive outcome they offer. Sealark has the opportunity to deliver a nature-positive outcome to the environment, as Rob has mentioned. That could still be negotiated, but not through the present bulldoze everything, forced through maximum profit approach. Threatened wildlife and their irreplaceable habitat will not survive theoretical offsets and detailed protocols, which they quote. It's mumbo-jumbo. We remember the original misrepresentation of the ecological issues. They wrote off greater gliders, gang cockatoos, yellow-bellied gliders, grey-headed flying fox, sugar gliders, eastern pygmy possums, and glossy black cockatoos, and their needed hollows in trees that need to be 100 plus years old. Some of those species they didn't even mention. They didn't even look for them, even though we know they're there. 9 existing planning instruments and principles do not support Sealark's proposal. 9 relevant planning documents over 30 years, including the Jervis Bay Settlement Strategy in 2003, and other growth and land use strategies, are clear on the principles. The key planning principles in those documents include requiring ecologically sustainable development, ESD, with the precautionary principles. You don't take a risk with it. If there's any doubt, you don't do it. Protecting forests, wetlands, corridors and habitats by limiting urban expansion. Guiding development away from high conservation value towards largely cleared land. Steering growth into existing town footprints or nearby cleared sites of low ecological value. Adding housing in existing larger urban areas near jobs, services, transport, and Nara and Ulladulla focus. The Halloran Sealark proposals are West Callala and a West Culburra, and the Pintabona's Sealark Road Wowley Creek proposals all fail these key requirements. 30 years of planning just disregarded. How can that be done at state level? How can it be done at local level? How can it be done at a federal level? At the last exhibition of plans, Callala and Shoalhaven citizens clearly did not support CELARC. We face a carbon climate crisis, an environmental crisis, and a housing crisis. The Halloran CELARC proposals for West Callala and West Culburra aggravate all three crises. These developers are looking to maximise profits. They divert skills and material resources and forever burden service providers and residents with costs such as are now totally traumatising our local council and the ratepayers. Developers take the money and run. The community carries the cost and consequences. This must stop. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Claire Hayward, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Culburra Residents and Ratepayers Action Group. We've been around for about 5 years, fighting this battle that Callala is now facing, a very similar battle. And I guess I'm here to talk a little bit of brass tacks about being a survivor of this campaign, I suppose, after 5 years, and how you keep going. So at CRAG, we believe that the West Culburra housing and industrial estate represents overdevelopment that is inappropriate for our village and will inevitably negatively impact the Culburra Beach environment, in particular the Crookhaven catchment, its coastal forest and wetlands, the river and Curleys Bay. So it's not approved yet, but people keep saying it's a done deal. So it's still pending approval with some pretty hefty conditions on it now. So we monitor all of the DAs. We have to become town planners and lawyers and ecologists all at once. And I do have a fantastic committee of incredibly smart people who really put in a lot of work every single day. So we've already observed that the State Department of Planning, the compliance officer, is very reliant on the developer to monitor their own compliance, which is obviously problematic. And we've already seen how the developer exploits loopholes in these conditions of the LEC approval. For example, the community consultation and the Geringer consultation conditions. In the first instance, the developer used its parent company, the Halloran Trust, which is a registered charity, to give donations to organisations in Culburra who would support their development proposals. In the second case, with the Geringer consultation, the developer has been extremely selective in which Geringer community members they consult to make sure these boxes, their consultation boxes, are ticked, despite continued opposition from the Geringer Local Aboriginal Land Council. So it's our job as an action group to stay across all of these plans, DAs and approvals to ensure the developer is being compliant and, wherever possible, to mitigate damage. In summary, the current CRAG strategy is to delay, because this is costly to the developer, to monitor and to mitigate damage to the environment. If we can't win the whole war, we can still win some battles, and we already have. The most important thing is not to give up. The history of the West Culburra development is a testament to this. The people who came before us and struggled to get West Culburra knocked back in 2018, they succeeded in getting the West Culburra concept plan scaled back. It was because of the tenacity and persistence and pressure of these community members who never gave up. They just kept the pressure on.
Yes.
Just to sum up, when I'm feeling low and prone to despair about what has happened over the last 5 years, I remind myself of this history and of how much CRAG has already achieved. We did not win the war with the Land and Environment Court in 2020, but we did mitigate environmental damage. CLARC's plan for a boardwalk along Curleys Bay was rejected, and the 100-metre buffer zone from the mangroves is now a condition of approval. The development has already been delayed by 2 years due to extensive soil and water testing under pressure from our experts who were sending in information about this. We did not win the war against CLARC's EPBC controlled action, but our lobbying and our ongoing pressure resulted in conditions being put in place to mitigate damage. The developer owns much more land in Callala, all the way up to Coonamarra Road. So when I feel like giving up, I remind myself of this history and how much more there is to lose if we do not continue to apply pressure and oppose destructive housing estates. Thank you.
My community, we call ourselves the Redhead Villagers. Our backstory is the same, outdated DAs. We've actually got 2 parcels of land with pristine forest in the hands of avaricious developers who don't care at all about appropriate or sustainable development. They don't care about biodiversity, nature, connection, things like climate change, bushfires, the effects of bushfires, things that are extinct or going extinct. We know they don't care. So I wanted to talk to you about our strategic planning project, and I want to talk to you about people power and determination. So we did a whole lot of community consultation. We did some workshops initially. 180 residents came to those workshops. We gathered information about what people felt about the area and what was important to them. We then ran a survey. The survey, we got over 400 responses. When we told this to the planning section in Shoalhaven Council, who were meant to be monitoring and supporting us in our project, they said, 400 responses? No way. How did you do that? And we said, we have an amazing community. Why? Why do you ask? Oh, if we get like 400 responses for the whole of the Shoalhaven to a survey that we run, we're really, really, really happy. So, it made the whole thing credible, and so many people were involved in it. And we came out with a character statement and also 6 main themes to what people wanted to happen. So, and then we worked out initially what our community actions would be, and what the time frame was, short term, medium term, and some of the things that we're going to do around that. And we know that what's going to happen if the developments go ahead is that they will be inappropriate, and there'll be holiday homes, because no one else can afford that kind of stuff. It's just obvious, and I really appreciate your real estate agent, Antonia, speaking so honestly about the situation. I just want to emphasise that being really determined and proactive and having faith in people power is absolutely essential. Do not give up. If we'd have given up, we would have lost the forest years ago. Expose the lies, find the loopholes. It does take a lot of work. Overcome the obfuscation and communicate simply, and be creative. We started off the campaign by doing yoga one early morning outside the fence. Then we decided to turn the fence into an art gallery one weekend, and we attracted, I don't know if you heard about it, but we attracted artists from, like, very contemporary, amazing artists from Sydney, and we just had an open air gallery. Like, it's not a fence, it's an art gallery. why not? I call this upside down thinking, finding the alternative and turning things and being captivating and finding the upside, captivating the upside. Be engaging, be attractive, be humorous. One thing I learned from my PhD looking at the knitting nanas is be humorous and have fun. Please God, have fun, because it is hard work and they will throw all sorts of documentation at you. But we have expertise in these communities that is so amazing. Be determined, be in it for the long haul, because those bastards are in it for the long haul and we can outlive them because we live here. Be compassionate, comparing, and gift one another the time and the energy that you can and the help that you can offer one another. And it's never a done deal. We have a joke in Manana that it's not over until the fat wombat sings. Thank you.